Welcome to Sunrise Sunset, the Jewish family in transition. I'm Audrey Gordon. My guests today are Horty Levkowitz from the Illinois Alliance for the Mentally Ill, and Julie Nessel, who is the Assistant Director of Thresholds, a rehabilitation facility for people who are mentally ill. Welcome to the show. You've been with us before, yes, Julie, and you've brought today this lovely lady who has is one of the founding members of the Illinois Alliance for the Mentally Ill. Tell me what that's all about.
Okay. We were 4 couples that met at a Threshold Parent Support Group. And we realized that there was nothing out there to help us deal with our mentally ill children. So we got together and formed an organization. It was called Voices. And as we saw the need for to communicate, to spread the word, so to speak, to get families out of the closet, to help alleviate their frustration and their fear and their guilt, we have grown. We are an advocacy group. We would like to bring about changes in the laws. We would like to educate the public as far as what mental illness is all about and the fact that it can strike any family at any time. We would like to make a better world and a better life for people who suffer from mental illness. And we started this at the grassroots level. We have meetings. We helped form the National Alliance for Mentally Ill, which has an office in Washington, D.C. And there are grassroots organizations across the country at this time.
Tell me, you were mentioning before the show something about 7720.
Right.
What is that?
7720 House is a residence for, a long-term residence for chronic mentally ill adults. We have a program director. We have different activities going on within the facility. It is more than just a place for a person suffering from mental illness to put their head at night. It is a home for these people.
Let's clarify something. When you said that your child had mental illness, first of all, your child is really an adult.
At this point, he is, yes.
And when we talk about mental illness, we're not talking about neuroses, we're not talking about acute depression, we are talking about things such as manic depressive illness and schizophrenias, which have a biological basis to them. I think that for the people who are listening to us, that's necessary in terms of clarifying. Is your son part of 7720?
Yes, he is.
And he is 30?
He is now 30 years old. He's been ill for 11 years. He was in school, in college, and he became ill, and that was the end of his productivity at that level. He has had many hospitalizations in the past 11 years because the condition is cyclic. He doesn't always respond to medication because his metabolism is off. It is a physical as well as a mental disease.
Well, I think it's important for people to know, and you and I touched on that earlier, that many of the severe mental illnesses are as if you have a physical handicap, that it's not just a question of being able to get yourself together or, you know, you can do it, I know you can do it.
Buck up or any of those other friendly phrases.
Let's get out of this, you know, let's stop this behavior now that you know what's wrong, let's just stop it. That it's as if you have a physical handicap that's visible, and the more insidious thing about mental illness is that it's not visible.
And
That's correct.
And therefore people tend not to be able to handle it. I was reading this morning in the paper that Senator Chaffee from Rhode Island is sponsoring a bill that has to do with the mentally retarded living in community houses in the same way as you're describing 7720. Is 7720, that is a place, a home for people who are chronically mentally ill, a new idea?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the 7720 house is a prototype in the state of Illinois, and perhaps in the country. We really don't have any figures on that. It is funded by the state as far as the staff is concerned. The parents, a group of parents from the Illinois Alliance got together and put up the money to purchase a 3-flat building that has been modified to accommodate the residents of the 7720 house.
I think the noteworthy part about that is this is an example where it's the first time the state has ever funded a program that was not professionally run and that provided a totally new lifestyle for individuals that needed that lifestyle.
This is DCFS, right? Department of Children and Family Services?
No, it's not. It's
DMH.
DMH,
Department of Mental Health.
Right.
And they pay the operating costs, or the parents cooperate with that, or?
Well, each resident pays room and board.
I see.
And we have a lease. The staff is paid by the funds from the state.
Is there professional staff there at all times?
Yes. We have a program director, a house director, and 2 part-time staff people.
Julie, I remember in the last show that we did, I said, what must it feel like for someone to have a member of their family who's mentally ill in the way in which we've said? What must it do to a family? And that's why you brought Horty along.
Yes.
So do you mind if we go to what happened to you? And I know that you were involved with Phil, your son, initially. So
that's right.
What happens to a family when at 19, an age of promise, you finally, or you find out that this person isn't going to do what you had hoped they were going to do with their life? What happens in the family? And, you know, please, both of you kind of jump in here.
Well, it can be very destructive. The family, and I can speak only for our family, the guilts and the fears and the anger that we felt was just overwhelming.
Who were you angry with?
Oh, with ourselves.
What did you do?
Well, of course, that's what we were so angry and guilty about. What did we do? We were trying to figure it all out because this was never going to happen in our family.
Did you think that you did something?
Oh, I'm sure. Many times. The time I said no when I should have said yes, or the time I said yes when I should have said no. You know, all those little things become very big things that run through your mind. The times when I wasn't home and I should have been home, or the times when my husband was at business when he felt he should have been home. Right, you know. And
so your mothering and your husband's fathering were at issue?
Sure.
A big part of that is we were brought up at times when the family was considered responsible for any deviant behavior.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So we're products of the culture that says it's our fault when we are parents.
Well, you know, when Freud laid it all out for America in the 30s, and now you had no excuse not to produce a perfect child.
Absolutely.
If you knew what went on inside, and Spock in the 50s, I mean, you knew what went on inside as well as outside,
Oh,
so therefore...
And it really has made it hard for the families to begin to accept the fact that mental illness is not their fault. It's very difficult for a family to accept that. We have seen mentally ill children destroying families, divorces, parents just walking out because they can't bear it, or they can't accept the blame, or they feel the other person's to blame and don't want to be with them.
Well, you're the bad parent, therefore I have to get out.
That we have
or
that.
I'm such a bad parent that I don't deserve to stay in a marriage.
That's right. And we have the other component of it where it's our cross to bear in life. We have to devote our life.
The whole thing about being ennobled by suffering.
I remember one family that I was working with where I suggested that maybe they could take a few days to go away without taking their adult child with them, and their adult child was living in one of our residences. And it took me 2 counseling sessions to get them to accept the fact that they could be out of town. They had the load to be available. Can you imagine what this does to a human life, to the life of the family and the life of the siblings? And Horty's lived through that.
I was going to
Yes.
ask you, you have other children.
Yes,
you
I
have
do.
2 daughters.
Right.
What happened, first of all, what happened to Phil when he became aware of what was essentially the rest of his life, the character of the rest of his life?
I think it took a long time for Phil to become aware that this is what was going to happen. There was a lot of denial on his part that he was ill and suffering, even though he had had multiple hospitalizations for long periods of time and a lot of support from Threshold and other agencies. I think just recently he has been able to accept, okay, this is what it's going to be like the rest of my life. As far as my daughters are concerned, I think that there was guilt on their part. You know, the fights that siblings have, I think that that was what they were feeling. I think the fact that they were able to see the support that my husband and I gave to one another helped them with dealing with their brother. If they're angry with him or upset with him, as brothers and sisters will become, they have no qualms about telling him that he's wrong or correcting him. I don't think that they have the guilt now that they had initially. They've had 11 years to get used to the fact that their brother is ill.
Were there times when you and your husband were fighting a lot, or just having such a hard time with each other that you feared for your marriage?
No, not really. I think that we were very fortunate. We were fortunate in the fact that when our son became ill, we became involved immediately in a support group, not because of something that we knew existed, but because the hospital asked us to participate. And I think that was very, very important in setting the groundwork for the rest of our lives.
This is the sort of thing that Threshold does,
Yes, it
that
is.
when patients are identified as having mental illness, that Threshold is then recommended for the family support group or to help the patient
Well,
rehabilitate.
we have a family support group, and all parents or close family, including siblings, of all of our new members are invited down to the agency to receive an explanation of who we are, what we do, to answer questions that they may have of us, to try to get a better understanding of what's going on with their loved one and Thresholds. And from this initial orientation group, all parents are invited to join an ongoing support group. Not all elect to. Many don't even come to the initial orientation. Also, staff tend to try to get parents involved if there is any relationship with the parent and the child. And now, don't forget that child may be 30 or 40 or 50 years old.
It's Horty's child.
But we do tend to do that and try to get the parent into the support group, or at least to the orientation.
You talked about some parents who didn't come.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that perhaps they didn't come because they don't want to label themselves parents of a child who's mentally ill? I mean, where I'm going with this is, what about how other people treated you? What was the initial experience all about when your friends, acquaintances, found out what you were going through?
Well, they were very sympathetic, but they didn't understand.
Sympathetic, you poor thing? Sympathetic? Pity, sympathetic?
Yes, yes.
Lots of people don't like pity.
Yeah, oh, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. I think that was their initial reaction because they did not understand what it was all about. Somebody called me up and said, oh, not to worry, with your love and guidance, he'll be well in no time. Well, you know, that was nice for that person to tell me that, but of course it didn't work out that way, and I knew that it wouldn't work out that
You
way.
knew that.
Yes, I am a registered nurse, so I've dealt with mental illness in the past, so I knew that we were in for a long siege.
An unending one.
Yeah, well, I didn't even view it as being unending. I just knew that it would be a long time. I think that, well, my husband and I started a support group through the Alliance, and we started it in our home. And it was amazing to me how many spouses did not share their feelings about their sick relative.
Well, because they didn't share their feelings about other things
well,
either. So.
Right, but we were only focusing in on their sick kid. And because my husband and I shared our feelings, so it was really strange to me that people did not share, that they didn't even talk about their sick kid. I guess they were just so inhibited by the fear and the guilt of having a sick kid that they could not act.
What is the content of the fear?
I think that, is your kid ever going to be well? Will your kid ever be able to have a normal, so-called normal life?
But then your fears are realized. The answers to that is no.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Fear is not based on fantasy.
No,
in this case.
no.
Not at all. It's a very real thing.
Right.
And in many families, it even gets to the point, will my child be alive tomorrow?
Yes.
Because
it's not unrealistic.
with manic depressive illness, they can be suicidal.
Or with some form with schizophrenic as well.
Some of yes.
Many people decide, I don't want to put up with this.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Do you feel that if a person, after living a life of manic depressive illness that perhaps is not well managed for whatever reason, or schizophrenia that is not manageable for whatever reason, has the right to take their life?
I imagine academically, I must say yes.
You don't have to
But
say anything. Honest to God.
Academically, but practically, I do have people I work with that are suicidal, and I will not give up. I will never give up.
Yeah, but what if they want to?
There's a point at which I can't stop them.
Right.
But that doesn't mean I'm going to ever stop trying to stop them. And ultimately, I may lose the battle, as unfortunately I have occasionally.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm a cockeyed optimist in some way. Not that I say that it'll ever be healed or anything like that. But I think that there's a value to life, and I just can't sit by and watch somebody destroy their own life.
I have also worked with suicidal people. I've also worked with quadriplegics, and then people who have no presenting symptom other than an acute depression. And I agree with you totally about not ever giving up in terms of not wanting to feel that I have ceased trying. But sometimes people are in situations, not those who are healthy, but those who are not. Sometimes they're in situations where it's their life. I mean, I'm not living it, neither are you. And for them, that seems to be okay, that they end their lives, even though you try very hard.
Yes, I can say that if I were in those circumstances, I would probably do the same thing.
Okay.
I can accept that.
Okay.
And people can deny me the ability to help, as unfortunately happened recently with somebody I had worked with. Didn't contact me, and is dead today. And knowing his circumstances, I can perfectly well understand it. And yet if he had contacted me, I would have tried to save him. It's not rational.
No, I understand. No, it's not rational. We do value life, but sometimes we have to think about what the quality of life means to the people that we're talking about. How did you handle your friends? What would you say if, and there will be people who are watching us, who have a youngster who will be diagnosed with manic depressive illness. Again, I know people in this situation, or someone who has schizophrenia. I remembered when I was a college psychologist, and I would send periodically home during the course of a semester 2 or 3 young people who had been diagnosed as schizophrenic. What would you say to a mother, a father, a family watching about how you learned to handle this event?
Well, I think it's very important for parents to involve themselves with other parents who have children who are mentally ill. I think it's very important to become involved in a support group where people can discuss the problems as they arise. And somebody always seems to have some resolve to the problems as they exist. Not long-term solutions, but how to handle situations. And I think it's very important for the family not to feel that they're going to make a mistake and make their child ill again, have another episode.
In other words, for the family to disconnect from the illness, to feel that what happens to the child is not their doing, that because they said clean up your room and he has an attack the next day.
Right. That's very important.
Okay.
To understand. I think that families must be educated, must understand what mental illness is, and must realize what the impact on the family is.
Well, how would you, in a perfect world, do this? I mean, how would you at Thresholds do this educating process?
Well, I think part of it is helping both the member and the family understand what mental illness is, the nature of the biochemical factors, the nature of the cyclical illness in many of the people, the effect and or limitation, depending on the individual, of the medication, how much medication can control. And many manic depressives, many schizophrenics can lead full lives if the medication can help them control the symptomatology. But I think parents have to be aware that this is not a time of guilt or personal responsibility, but rather a time of need for support. And through this understanding, it hopefully can become easier for the parent to accept.
You said cyclical. Perhaps we could clarify, because I think we know what we're talking about, but other people don't. Cyclical meaning that at times the person can look fine in terms of whatever is going on chemically in the body, or just the way in which they're living their life, that they can look fine.
Mm-hmm.
And that at other times they are off the wall one way or the other. Does this still happen to your
Yes.
son?
Yes. The disease does cycle, and we look for longer periods of time out of the hospital than we have had in the past, because he's had multiple long hospitalizations, because he has to be hospitalized when he is escalating and peaking.
What about when he's going down?
That he also needs to be supervised during that period. It's a very important time to kind of get him back up to the right level, to stabilize him.
Something that you said also I think needs some expansion, and that is that there are different levels. Your son happens to have a particularly severe form
Right.
of manic depression, and as you said, there are many manic depressives who are out in the community, can lead normal, productive lives as long as they stay on their medication.
Mm-hmm.
And that we should not give the impression that if you have manic depressive illness that you are going to have to be hospitalized repeatedly, or even if you have some schizophrenic diagnosis that you might have to also be repeated. That's not true.
That is not true. Many do, but I would say most don't.
Most don't.
That's right. We tend to see the ones that do need the cycle, that do need the extra help. But when we look at the spectrum in the community, there are many people walking around taking whatever medication is appropriate on whatever schedule is appropriate and leading full productive lives, and probably will continue to lead full productive lives without any other major episodes.
This could be a little bit, I think, of a scary question. I think it would be if I was listening, and that is many of the diseases that we're talking about are diagnosed onset adolescence or sometime in the adolescent period.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's all the normal adolescent stuff where parents walk around and say, you know, I think the kid is crazy, but indeed the child is only going through the normal adolescence. How would you distinguish? What clued you in that your son was, I mean, at 18 he didn't have a problem, and at 19 he did.
Right.
And I know that he's severe. You know, maybe we have a minute to get to you. Let's see if we can have a minute with you about, how did you recognize?
Well, Phil had been away on a weekend with some friends and came home talking about his car making only left turns.
I see.
He had acute onset.
I see. So it was
There
sudden.
was absolutely, and there was no question that something was drastically wrong.
What other kinds of symptoms would be clear indications to somebody who knows?
I would think that a sudden dramatic change in achievement, academic, a dramatic change in relationships, friendship patterns, usually a withdrawal, and a relatively, also a dramatic change in the ability to judge reality. Can I look at something and see how it impacts upon me in terms of my own best interest? Now, with only a minute, those are real shorthanded, but I think those would be the key things to look for.
Okay. Real quick, can you tell people where Thresholds is located and phone number?
2700 North Lakeview is our address, and the phone is 281-3800.
And for people who want to help the Illinois Alliance?
Yes, our post office box is 1016 Evanston, Illinois, 60204. And I don't have the telephone number right here. I have it out there.
Do I assume that people could call you if they had questions about members of their family who are mentally ill and might need some community help?
Yes.
Okay, and the same for you as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here. Julie Nessel from Thresholds and Horty Levkowitz from the Illinois Alliance for the Mentally Ill. This is Audrey Gordon for Sunrise Sunset. Thank you very much for watching.